Everybody, it's me, TruePowerIsMine, and this is a special report. Today, we have a very special guest I'm pleased to introduce. His name is Wanye Madsen, and a brief bio of this gentleman, not to include everything because it would just take me hours, but he was a U.S. naval member. Also, he is a journalist, author, columnist, specializing in intelligence and international affairs. Also, a former NSA member. We have Wanye Madsen on the phone today. Wonderful man. And guys, really, this is real time. This is my very first conversation with Wanye. You all know normally I talk to people beforehand, but this is the very first time. Been extremely busy, but we got you, Wanye. And, I do have some questions for you, Wanye, but, first I would like, for you to say a couple words to the audience, if you like.
Well, I just would say that there's an awful lot of news out there, and I certainly don't agree with Mr. Trump when he calls it fake news, but it's not. I would say there's diversionary news. There's a lot of important, and these cable TV networks, I try to bypass them with my website by concentrating on real events that are taking place.
Would you plug your website for us? I'm sorry, I didn't plug your website.
It's WaneMadsenReport.com.
Yes.
And it's a subscription site for the what I call the executive content. But also there's free side of the firewall, the paywall, that provides just what I call news and pithy comments, links to stories that just don't get a lot of attention that are very, very important things that are going on.
Well, I will put those links in the comment section below. When I finally edit this video, I'll have links directly to his website, so you can check that out. Do you have any books that or anything like that you recently read?
Yeah, I have several, but I'll just mention the last one because it's probably getting a lot more attention than most. It's called The Almost Classified Guide to CIA Front Companies, Proprietaries, and Contractors, and it's really the only effort contractors into one reference book. It's encyclopedic format, and apparently based on some of the reviews, no one else has done this before. I didn't think they did. Frankly, the idea for it was from a former CIA officer who also happened to work for two of the major news networks. But after he worked for the agency, NBC and CBS, and he said that this book was very important. I should do it. And I said, I don't think I could get more than 100 pages on a book like that because, how many of these front companies can there be? We know about the big ones, Air America and Southern Air Transport and, some of the others, but now it's 422 pages.
Wow.
And so I was even surprised when I started compiling.
And you got all this information like through Freedom of Information Acts, I'm assuming?
Yeah, well, FOIA, also many hours at the National Archives going through old CIA files. Fortunately, they're all electronic now, so it wasn't pouring through boxes of paper. And also there's many other books about the CIA have mentioned certain companies, but as I say, nobody has ever
Normally, I would leave the questions for at the end, but I really want to get these questions out like kind of early, so then we can move on to the rest of the discussion. But I have a question from Dimebag Darley. He's actually my co-host on the other morning show. He wanted me to ask you, what is your opinion on William Binney?
And certainly when I worked at NSA, I know he was somewhere in that labyrinth when I worked there back in the 80s. But I certainly, after I got to know him, I realized that he was sort of the architect of some of the programs that I heard about way back in the late 80s when I was still working at the NSA. And he said, "Yeah, I'm the guy that came up with that." And I said, "That's amazing." I was a little bit put off by what I had heard, because what the NSA this is 86, 87 time frame. What they were talking about was a program called Total Hero, just about anything. And now, of course, we know with the internet, they've gone to more advanced forms of being able to read everything, emails, and we know that there were these programs that we found out because of Ed Snowden's revelations, Prism and other programs like that. I know Bill Binney, and I know he later had the same reservations about where NSA was going with some of this technology as I did.
Okay. The next question is from Rico86. Ask him about Robert Mueller's investigation.
Muller, he's a former prosecutor, and he worked in the Southern District of New York. He also worked out of Boston. His primary brief was going after white collar crime, and a lot of the people he's brought onto his team are specialists in similar criminal areas, especially money laundering. And of course, the Southern District of New York, where actually Muller has had a lot of experience there, as has Andrew Weinberg, who is one of his top investigators. Jim Comey came out of there.
Really?
Andrew McCabe was also out of the Southern District of New York, and he specialized in he was part of what they call the FBI, New York Police Department, a joint task force to combat Eurasian organized crime. And why did they have to say Eurasian?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about Mongolians or people from Tajikistan or Afghanistan. We're talking about Russian Jews primarily, who came into New York to the Brighton Beach area in the 1980s.
The Kosher Nostra.
People like Henry Jackson, Kosher Nostra is another name. It's used by the FBI, but for political. I feel that one of the reasons that Trump went after McCabe is because he knew his background in putting some of Trump's old cronies in jail. We're talking about the late 90s and early 2000s, and so Comey worked in that office. Comey worked out of the Southern District, and he did his fair share in putting a lot of these gangsters. These are people that mostly live in Brighton Beach and Brooklyn. They call it Little. Came over here when people like Senator Henry Jackson said, "Oh, we're going to keep sanctions on the Soviet Union unless you allow Soviet Jews to emigrate to Israel." Well, guess what? Surprise, surprise. They didn't go to Israel. They came to New York, and they got involved in all kinds of organized criminal activity. And one of them, by the way, is named Michael D. Cohen, who all his associates, his father-in-law, were all involved in criminal activities. Everything from running numbers to the taxi cab business that they were in, which wasn't entirely on the up and up, and casinos like Mr. Trump's casinos in Atlantic City, which were so mobbed up. We still don't know what happened in 1989 when Donald Trump went to the helipad in Midtown Manhattan and waved goodbye to three of his executives with the Trump organization that he had asked to fly to New York for the press conference on the big upcoming boxing match between Hector Camacho Hector Macho Camacho, and I forget the other guy that was in the fight. Anyway, that fight was scheduled in the Atlantic City Convention Center for February of 1990. Trump went out there and said, "Hey guys, something came up. I can't join you on the flight back to Atlantic City on a helicopter." And he runs a helicopter, crashes right off the Garden State Parkway about 20 minutes outside of Atlantic City. What's very strange about the crash is the pilot of the helicopter. All the three execs and the pilot co-pilot were killed, but the pilot was in communication with the control tower at McGuire Air Force Base just before the incident. Said everything's fine. You know, they did a check on his progress, and checking in with the control tower, and people in the area said they heard a loud explosion. The debris field was over a few miles, and which is odd for a helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
And the three execs who died were scheduled to be questioned by the FBI about mob influence with Donald Trump's casinos in Atlantic City and his promotion of sporting events like the Hector Camacho boxing match. And of course, the links were to Nicky Scarfo, who was the mafia, head of the mafia in Atlantic City and Philadelphia. And just a little footnote, 7 days before Donald Trump was sworn in as president, Nicky Scarfo, who got life in prison, died suddenly of a heart attack.
Oh, well, we do have drugs. We do have drugs to make that happen.
So, yeah, that's a long story about Bob Mueller. This is what to prove the election manipulation. I tried. I wrote about it in 2000 in Florida. I wrote about it in 2004 in Florida and Ohio. But in both elections, they were delivered to George W. Bush on a silver platter, when in fact Al Gore had won in 2000 and John Kerry won in 2004. That's a very hard one because both parties have their hands in this election manipulation. Republicans a bit more than much more, I would say, than Democrats. But what Mueller can get this guy on, and his cronies and his son-in-law and his two sons, is money laundering, and that's exactly what Trump has been up to ever since he started dabbling in high visibility real estate casinos in Atlantic City.
Wow. I mean, another question from Christy Carter. Why are out of the country couples adopting black kids and no one is talking about it and the numbers are being suppressed?
Are they talking about foreign people?
Yeah, foreign couples adopting black children
out of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's something I haven't really been keeping up on. I'm very concerned, though, about the safety of children with this administration. We know about the issue with Putin stopping the adoption of Russian children because there was abuse taking place. The couples that were adopting Russian kids were abusing them, and he found out about it. It was not only physical abuse; it was sexual abuse. And now it just came across that these Mexican and Hispanic children that are being separated from their parents at the border are going to be put in military bases in Arkansas and Texas. My experience with the military, it's nice to go out on Memorial Day and Armed Forces Day and watch the jets and the parades and all that. I was involved in when I was in the Navy in a major bust of. I was working as a temporary special agent at the time for the FBI and NCIS.
Oh wow!
It was called NIS in those days. A major pedophile ring in the U.S. Navy that did not stop with the U.S. Navy. It was in all services.
No way.
And it was in all ranks, from enlisted all the way up to admirals. And so I'm very concerned that we got a president who I've written about.
I'm so sorry, Wayne. I'm so sorry. I never heard of that. You are saying our generals, our colonels, our majors, all our officers,
all of them. not all of them, but
I mean,
these people should have gone to prison. But and now my commanding officer, who I turned in and testified at his court martial, he was supposedly given 4 years at hard labor before he didn't do that. He did 18 months attending sex abuse, seminars or whatever.
wow.
It was very light. It sure wasn't making little ones out of big ones on the rock pile, that's for sure. And he did only 18 months. Look, they take care of each other.
Wow.
I've heard of cases where admirals and generals have been involved in the same kind of thing, and they just let them retire and say, okay, there's a very nasty culture. Look, we know it happened in the Catholic Church. We know
yes.
it happens in other religious denominations. I mentioned, Michael Cohen out of the Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn. They have a huge pedophile problem there, and they try to cover it up. It's like we'll take care of it, just like the Vatican said we're going to take care of it,
and they have.
And so I do know one thing. There was, of course, after the Haiti earthquake, there was a group out of Arkansas, a woman who ran some sort of Baptist mission type thing, went to Haiti and tried to get these kids back to the United States, and they still had parents. They had discovered their parents. Look, the same thing happened in Africa. I don't know about happening in reverse, but I know when in Chad, when there was a big war problem, civil war in Chad, that the French were adopting kids and sending them up to France. In one case, they wound up in an operation that was run by the brother of Nicolas Sarkozy, the president of France, and it was determined later that there was pedophiles running.
Yeah.
We got to rethink our attitude towards pedophiles. We can't put them in jail. We got to treat them for their illness. Like, let's give them a pass. Well, it's obvious to me later why he said that. He was trying to protect his brother for one thing, and so I'm always concerned when you hear about something like, why are foreign couples adopting African American children out of the United States? Now, hopefully they have good intentions, but I'm sorry, what I've seen in the past with religious groups, the missionaries,
yes,
the Catholic Church,
yes,
the Orthodox Jewish community
yep.
in Brooklyn and in New Jersey, these people are up to no good.
That's bullshit.
And then Donald Trump in 1994 accused of sodomizing and raping a 13-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl. So, I mean,
that's fucking bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm enraged now. Seriously, I'm fucking enraged. The only thing I ever heard about was the fucking British fucking government doing their fucking stupid shit, having soldiers take kids off streets for their bullshit. But I thought that shit actually died there. I did not realize this damn near.
Unfortunately, look, all you got to look at some of the operations, and now I don't know this because I certainly don't have any direct communications with Robert Mueller's office, but he's looking at a lot of things in Trump's background, and in New York in 1994. All that information has been made aware to Mueller and his team. Now, there's a statute of limitations issue.
Yes.
But, the more he knows about the targets, in this case, Trump, the better off he can go after this guy for his, high crimes and misdemeanors, which, of course, you need to prove if you're going to impeach somebody.
Exactly. And you better have all your ducks in the barrel because, you are dealing with the most powerful man.
Yeah, you saw today the Senate had a lunch. The Republicans in the Senate had a luncheon for Trump, and not one during the luncheon criticized this Kelly Sadler, who was one of his communications people, for saying that, oh, McCain,
Yeah.
he's dying anyway. You know, this is their colleague, their Senate colleague. Now, one can disagree or agree with McCain, and I certainly have written a lot of negative things about McCain over the years, but these Republicans wouldn't even stand up and speak on behalf of one of their colleagues.
No.
When this woman said what she said. And Trump butt kissers there is. And he says he's a friend of, he claims he's a friend of John McCain.
Oh, God.
So none of them. So, you know, I mean, so what I'm getting at is if you remember, Trump said I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Yes.
And, you know,
oh my God. Yes. Yes.
You're going to have to prove something even worse than that. And I think pedophilia, I think it's worse maybe than even going out and murdering somebody. I mean, it's a taboo in all. It's a taboo in almost every religion I can think of.
Yeah, with people who are actually practicing the religion for real. You know, you go in there with notarial,
real religious,
yes,
real religious people. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm sorry.
Certainly, that wouldn't apply. That probably wouldn't apply to most of the Republican senators because.
Are they really practicing? Let's face it. You know, a lot of religion texts have been debased, been misinterpreted. And actually, I do have a question for you myself. Is there any relevance or truth to this QAnon or QAnon phenomenon?
No. The idea that Trump is rolling up an international and the whole Pizzagate thing and all this business. Look, he's part of it. He's part of it. And remember one thing about Donald Trump, how he projects. He always accuses people of doing what he's doing, right?
Right.
He says they're lying. They put out fake news. Well, he's a liar. He puts out fake news. Beginning, I looked into it. I found some things, but nothing illegal. I found that, for example, you know, the idea was, look, I've been to that pizza place, the Comet Ping Pong. It's a neighborhood pizza place up on Connecticut Avenue in D.C. It's in kind of I would say a high rent residential area. But, you know, families, you can't park there, so families walk up there and take their kids there, right?
Right.
So, you know, there's no basement. They said, well, people, they try to explain it away. These are idiots. I mean, there's one guy on the internet puts out YouTube videos that doesn't know anything about Washington, D.C. Some of these people try to say, well, the kids were being tortured in the basement. Well, there's no basement. Well, no, it's the subway line. Well, the subway line runs nowhere near this place, right? I mean, there's not a subway station anywhere near that. The red line is pretty far away. I've walked it, I know, from the metro station. And then, so they try to, you know, this is, of course, fake news. And unfortunately, you know, people like Alex Jones hypes this stuff.
Yes.
He puts it out there, and then he has to issue retractions when he sit with you know, he gets a lawyer's letter saying, look, my client's going to sue you for defamation. and then he pulls back. You know, I mean, you know, I just say anybody that's thinking about suing Alex Jones, that guy's paying $47,000 a month in support to his ex-wife.
Wow.
So good luck trying to collect from this guy. This guy doesn't have hardly any money. That's why he's selling all kinds of voodoo powders and,
right.
You know, the stuff that looks like it's been cooked up by Grandpa and the Munsters down in the basement. You know, I mean, he's just like Donald Trump. Donald Trump has no money either. That's why we're in trouble. He's basically taken favors and money from almost every gangster and crook on the planet, and now they've you know, they're calling in the markers.
Funny that you mentioned that about Trump, President Trump, actually, because, you know, I've been talking to Judge Joe Brown, and he basically said the richest president we ever had was Barack Obama. And most people don't get it because Barack Obama's stepfather, Lo Centero, apparently had a lot of money in Obama.
Well, Lolo worked in the oil. Well, I was in Jakarta and I investigated. I wrote a book called The Manufacturing of back in the day, and he was a member of what they call the Jakarta Oil Club. By the way, there's a Houston Oil Club and there's a Dallas Oil Club. You got to have a little bit of money, or you got to
something.
Be a person of means to be members of these these organizations. So he didn't do well. He didn't do badly, I should say, and I think he did fairly well by Indonesian standards. The other thing is, high rent, probably the highest rent area in Jakarta at the time.
Wow.
I've been to the home, and it had a wall around it. Even at one time, looked like it had some sort of guard shack.
Like that I found so kind of whack. It seemed like Obama cared more about homosexual issues, cared more about Goldman Sachs issues, cared more about every issue other than the true issues.
Look, when he graduated from Columbia, he went to work for Business International Corporation. This was a CIA front. They're in my book. They get 3 pages. They got a big entry. And Business International Corporation, they had, two areas for the CIA that they were penetrating. One was Wall Street, obviously. And Obama edited a couple of newsletters that were directed towards investors. This was back before hedge funds, but Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, which is like across the street from the United Nations. So that's how he got his start after he graduated from Columbia. And then somebody decided he's better off if we parachute him into the south side of Chicago so he can do some spying for us. There was some suspected domestic groups. One is they wanted him to check out the El Rukin gang, which was thought to be getting assistance from Gaddafi. And I always say that one of the reasons Obama wanted to, started that war against Gaddafi was to, basically get him out of the way, because Gaddafi would have remembered any kinds of deals to help the El Rukin gang in Chicago. And if Libyan intelligence were involved in this, and I don't think that's been proven either, but Gaddafi may have had some information about young Obama's exploits in Chicago. He was involved in a lot more than getting money together to build a softball field for the police athletic league.
Well, I thought Gaddafi was supposed to back in the day had given Louis Farrakhan like $1 billion or was in the process.
Yeah, Farrakhan was part of the target. There was another group. I want to say there was a group called the Black Rangers, and the guy that headed up that, Charles Ford, he's serving a life in prison out at the Supermax in Florence. I wonder why he got such a heavy sentence. He was the first guy charged with domestic terrorism in the United States.
What did he do?
I bet he was found with guns, and they were trying to say he was going to commit. He never did anything. They were saying he was going to commit terrorist attacks, right? I mean, this is like back in those days.
Pertaining to Louis Farrakhan, because I have a question popping up in the live feed. Do you know a guy named Jeff Fort? Jeff Fort was accused of trying to get anti-tank missiles.
No, that's that. I said his name was Jeff Fort. Yeah, that's the guy I'm talking about. Yes,
Jeff Fort.
I got the first name wrong. Fort, Forte, and he was accused of this, and he got life.
A life
in Supermax. So he can't communicate with anyone. I said during the Obama administration, I said, if anyone could get a message to Jeff Ford, or get a message out, it would certainly would be interesting. But the whole purpose of the Supermax is to not allow anybody any communications. Yeah.
Dang. I mean, one thing I saw the other day, one of our officials was talking about, it was a random YouTube video. One of our officials was talking about, we're basically declaring Iran or something as a state sanction of terror, right? How can we do this in clear face when we all know that we armed the Mujahideen, which later becomes Al Qaeda, which later becomes ISIS? Then we find ISIS with our weapons. It's like, if anybody's sponsoring state terror, I hate to say it, but it almost seems like our intelligence community is doing that.
Well, us and their friends like the Saudis and the Israelis and the United Arab Emirates. This is where the funding for Al Qaeda came through the Central Bank of Dubai. I had the chief auditor contacted me years ago when I was investigating 9/11, and it became very clear to me that 19 guys with box cutters did not pull it off, and nor did a guy named Bin Laden who was supposedly hiding out in a cave in Afghanistan. This was Israel, Mossad, and the Saudis, and you can throw in a couple other suspects, I'm sure, but they were the evil three, and of course the United Arab Emirates laundering the money to finance these so-called hijackers.
Now,
yeah, I never thought some of the things they were accused of on the airplanes actually happened.
Well, but you look at the effects of that. The effects of 9/11 did something the fucking Confederates couldn't do. It did something the Nazis couldn't do. It did something the communists couldn't do. And what is that? Literally strip American citizens of basic rights through the Patriot Act.
Certainly.
And other things.
Yeah.
And that's why I find it to be the most tragic deal of the whole situation. We are less free because of 19 guys. If anything, we should ban airports instead of our freedom.
And then, people are saying now, oh, George W. Bush, he looked so moderate. It was during his time that this happened. And now you get a real fascist president, Donald Trump, bringing in all these terrible neocons like Bolton and others. And then you got neo-Nazis in his administration, and you got diehard Likudniks like Jared Kushner and his daughter Ivanka, and this whole nonsense with moving that embassy. They knew what was going to happen, and she's over there dining with Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham while 60 people are being massacred, 1,700.
Now, can we talk about that embassy move? Because I was raised basically a Christian, so I know about the so-called biblical prophecy where we have to somehow get rid of the Dome of the Rock so we can get that new third temple in there so the Antichrist can go in there and profess himself God, and then the Messiah can come back, right? I mean, and a lot of people fear that doesn't. Restored will not all pass before Christ returns. Well, when was Israel restored after 2,000 years of not being around? It was 1948 with the League of Nations. Nazi Jews, not even the true Semitic Jews of the Bibles. We're talking about European converts. Right. So now we're having a situation where these evangelical, basically extremists, are really going to push this prophecy, but suffer instead of it to be played out, naturally through God's time. They're going to be God's helper and make this thing come down, because the reason why this prophecy will not be fulfilled, even if they get the third temple in, because God was supposed to call the people back to the land, not the United Nation.
Yeah. Well, I've been over to Israel twice, and I've gotten, you can have.
Well, do you see any racism? Do you see any racism with like the blue-eyed old white male Jew versus the true Semitic Jew that's basically brown skin or melanated man or woman.
By the way, the original people of the book, you're talking about the Old Testament.
Yes.
They're Palestinians.
Yes.
Many of them converted to, they first converted to Christianity. So they're the people of the New Testament we read about. And then later, when the Muslim invasion took place, many of them converted to Islam. And, I've had conversations with people that say, prophecy was fulfilled. The Dome of the Rock is the third temple.
What?
Because mosque is just an Arab word for, it's an Arabic word for
temple. But doesn't the temple have to be specifically designed like Solomon's temple? There's a mathematic. Okay, there's for those you don't know, there's this thing called sacred geometry. All right, you can build things along ley lines, along certain hypothetical points of energy that actually amplifies what you're trying to do in said building. All right. Well, according to sacred geometry, there is actual magical, resonance or power in the actual dimensions of Solomon's temple, the way it was designed.
The problem with Israel is that the country was founded by socialists.
Yes.
Ben-Gurion, they didn't believe any of that stuff. I mean, these were people who were agnostic, to say the least, and many of them were atheists. So all of a sudden, then come in the real crazies, and they're talking about Israel. We need to restore biblical Israel. Well, what is biblical Israel? There's some maps that show it between the Nile and the Euphrates, and then you look at where the U.S. has shed its own blood and treasure. Iraq, Syria, and for a short time, Egypt looked like it was a real problem after the Mubarak was overthrown. But that whole Arab Spring movement. But you look at the people who were responsible for this, and you find all these neocons, whether they were in the Bush administration or the Obama administration. Now they're back in the Trump administration. But you got all these people that are basically nothing more than agents of influence for the most right-wing lunatic fringe in Israel. That happens to be the government there, Netanyahu and his cronies. And that's why, Palestinians are, I got to give them a lot of credit. They're playing this along instead of, becoming very violent, which they could do. Of course, they'll be massacred just like we saw in Gaza, which, by the way, this guy, the deputy White House press secretary, I forget his name, Raj Shah, that's his name, referred to Gaza as southern Israel. That's disgusting because the most extreme Jewish terrorist group in Israel, which is in the government, by the way, and has been funded by the David Friedman, who's Trump's old lawyer, who's now U.S. ambassador over there. They want to depopulate the people who live in this open air ghetto called Gaza, and have the Jews resettle it.
Wow.
Which they were, Sharon got them out of there originally, and they refer to it as Gaza as southern Israel. Now you got this Raj Shah using the most extreme Jewish Likudnik language in referring to Gaza as southern Israel. We've already had the State Department refer to the West Bank, which is illegally occupied by Israel, as Judea and Samaria. Only the right-wing lunatics in Israel, which is the government of that country, refer to that as Judea and Samaria.
Wow.
We've got a, in matters of diplomacy, I don't think religion has any part to play. I actually was opposed to the U.S. establishing diplomatic relations with Vatican City because I do feel that is a violation of separation of church and state. And it's fine that they're an independent country, but why do we have to assign an ambassador there? And the ambassador now is Callista Gingrich, the wife of Newt Gingrich, another right-wing lunatic. Why can't you just have the U.S. ambassador to Rome, to Italy, to the Italian Republic, serve as look, you're accredited to represent us at the Vatican. But
Right.
why? You know, I don't see
It's like you're
reason
double
for that.
paying for the same service. That guy could easily go from Rome to the
Exactly.
Vatican.
Two embassies in Rome when only one would be sufficient.
Now
we've got basically two in Israel. Most of the people are going to still work out of the Tel Aviv embassy, but the freedman, this guy who gave money to a Jewish terrorist group, is going to be residing in Jerusalem. I guess so he could be closer to Netanyahu.
Mm. You know, and this whole Israel thing, kind of reason why I bring it up, it segues into what's going on down in South Africa with the EFF. My question is this: how come we haven't done something with the native peoples of America? You know, if everybody's getting, you know, the Jews got their land back, South Africans getting their land back.
I live in outside of Tampa, and I fly the American flag, but right alongside of it, I fly the flag of the Seminole Nation, because the Miccosukee Seminole tribe never did sign a peace treaty with the United States. They decided to move deep into the Everglades, and they lived off the land. And they claim that everything up to basically probably where I live is part of the Seminole Nation, and that would include Miami and Naples and Venice and Key West and everything else. But anyway, but when you look at what Trump's doing, he's right now he wants to mine on Indian on tribal land. He wants to exploit tribal land, and this is in violation of the native treaties that were international treaties signed by in the old executive building of the White House executive mansion, and now he's abrogating these treaties with these native tribes, these what the Canadians call First Nations, which I kind of like that term, because they are nations. But I said I would much rather pay some sort of rent to a restored Seminole Nation governing the southern part of Florida, than pay taxes to Governor Republican governor we have up in Tallahassee, who's only known for defrauding Medicaid. He had a company, and now he's running against the Democratic Senator Bill Nelson. They're saying, oh, he's ahead in the polls. I mean, the guy's he's a big crook as Donald Trump. But like I say, I would rather see the Native Americans take over much more of their land, because they were the best stewards of the land. Yes. And they wouldn't allow these companies to pollute the way they do. And I would hope that they would take a guy like Scott Pruitt from Oklahoma, which used to be called the Indian Territory, and scalp him. I mean, I think in his case, he deserves to be scalped.
You know, that segue, we're talking about environmental issues. I was just talking to a dear friend of mine, a cousin actually of mine, Jane Elliott, and she basically was telling me about what's going on in Iowa. The governor, the egghead up there, declared the state of Iowa as a sanctuary state. And the reason why I'm telling you this, hopefully, you're a true investigative journalist, you can kind of look into this. They got these confined hog farms that are all over the state up there, polluting fecal material. People are breathing in, getting sick. If you try to protest, you get arrested. A true degrade of our rights. And we got to get true journalists involved in this and point a light, because see, there's an aquifer. All right, this aquifer extends all over all these states around us. Iowa, Kansas, and even that the pipeline that you're talking about. If it breaks and that oil gets it down in that groundwater, guess what? Us folks down here in Missouri, Arkansas,
fracking that's going on. There's people in Pennsylvania have turned on their faucet, and flames have come out.
Oh shit!
Flames have come out because of the gas. The fumes and whatnot, and you got on the Delmarva Peninsula, which is Delaware, Maryland, and a little part of Virginia. You got all these Purdue chicken plants,
Yes.
Tyson chicken, and of course, where does all the chicken manure get? It goes into the water. It goes into the Chesapeake Bay, and listeria. You got outbreaks of listeria in fish, and you know, shellfish and regular fish. You've got this problem. And you mentioned the pig farms in Iowa. It's the same thing with some of the cattle ranches. It's just it's cattle just wallowing, packed so tight, and wallowing in their own manure, and all this stuff, of course, goes in. And yeah, and what is Trump doing? He's got this guy Pruitt who's basically tearing apart the EPA.
Yeah,
that agency was put in place by Richard Nixon, who, when you compare him to Trump,
is an angel.
Saying this is like Watergate. No, it isn't, because Nixon, he did terrible things, but Nixon was very progressive when it came to OSHA and the EPA. He created those agencies
because we only got one. We only got one planet, Wayne. One mud ball that we're floating around the sun, going through the universe, and Earth is the true mothership. That's all we got. And we're sitting here crapping on it, polluting it. What about our babies? What about our grandchildren? What about their children?
Well, look, Trump doesn't care. But you never hear him talk about things like that. He lives for the moment. He lives for himself. He doesn't care about these things. His fans, the people who really supported him, are now getting a big taste of what he was all about. China and putting sanctions on soybeans and sorghum. Well, guess what? How that's hurting states like Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas.
Yes.
They're out of business.
But you know what? The funny thing about that, I'm glad you mentioned those states. Now that we're kicking all the illegals out, no one's there to pick the fruit or the product off the vine.
True. I live in the strawberry capital of the United States here in Florida, and the people who would be normally out in the fields picking strawberries, they're hunkered down because they don't know when ICE is going to raid a field, and just that's it. They take their kids away. So they're hunkering down, and the local stores, the Chamber of Commerce is raising hell, and all these Republicans who support these idiots like Rick Scott and these guy like Marco Rubio, that idiot. They're all saying, "Oh, Trump's hurting us." It's your Republicans that have done all this. So don't complain to me. You were out voting for these people, and now you don't have anyone to pick the crops. The daily onions in Georgia, the same thing. There's crops that are rotting.
Yep.
In the field, and now Maryland, because Chesapeake, the blue crab season, they don't have anyone to pick the crabs, to can them and send. So not only are crabs very expensive, but actually, in one respect, it's good. They're going to at least this will let the crab population sort of rebound. Yeah, but so people are complaining. What a bushel of crabs cost now. It's doubled in price because there's nobody to pick the crabs. They were all here on those special visas, right? Those special temporary work visas. They've all been sent home.
The thing about it, though, I try to always tell people on the show, we're headed for a perfect storm. All right. And I love to use this analogy right here. You got people on food stamps, right? But for real, these people are subsidizing your food as a working man or woman, because when they go down to Walmart or wherever to spend their little food stamp dollars, that actually helps Walmart to keep the prices down for everybody across the board. Now that Trump's going to give these people food boxes instead of the actual money, now
they've looked at these food boxes and it's stuff. And he thinks it's like when you used to go to these very expensive soirees in Washington, they'd give you a swag bag when you left, and that's what it's like. He says they'll give them a swag box of donated items or something. It's ridiculous. That's what he's used to. And of course, you like to go to the soirees and the events where you get in the swag bag would be like a couple of round trip first class tickets on some airline and flying you to Europe and a $500 a jar of beluga caviar.
Yes.
So yeah, this guy, he doesn't know how normal people live. He's never held a real job in his life.
No.
He inherited his money from his daddy, who, by the way, was infamous in New York for not renting to African Americans.
Because he was part of KKK. So let's say he was a part of KKK.
He was arrested at a KKK rally in 1927. And I believe, and I can't prove it, and I've looked at this, and I've written about it, but I need to spend a lot of time in New York. I believe that Fred Trump, his father, was most likely a German agent during World War II, because a Nazi agent, because he volunteered to build barracks at 3 naval bases which were embarking troops to go to Europe, where you could actually count the troops. And of course, there were people in this country who would radio that information to U-boats,
yes,
German U-boats off the coast, so they know what ships to torpedo based on whether they had a large number of U.S. troops on board. And so Daddy Trump volunteered, of course he got paid for this, to build barracks at Chester, Pennsylvania, which was an embarkation point for troops that were coming out of basic training at Fort Dix.
Yes,
and at Newport News, Virginia, and in Norfolk, Virginia. And those troops were being trained at all kinds of training bases, Fort A.P. Hill in Virginia, Fort Monroe in Virginia. But why did Fred Trump pick those 3 particular bases to build barracks? Because that's where the ships were loading. The Canadian troops coming down by train from Canada were embarked on the same ships, leaving those ports. So I do believe that when they had that big Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden, I believe it was in 1936, I think Fred was probably in the crowd.
That's diabolical. That's straight up diabolical. I mean, total traitor to the Republic, total traitor to freedom. I don't care what anybody says. I don't wish harm on no Nazi or nothing like that. But I am consciously aware of, if they ever had true power, me and you would not be talking tonight. And so many people,
they may be getting very close. You got to figure the reason why Trump was KKK in Queens is because the Nazi American hadn't formed yet. So where would he have gone later? I mean,
wow.
You can't tell. Nobody could tell me he changed his spot. He was just waiting for when the Nazis came. Look, Hitler didn't even hardly have a group in Germany in 1920 and 27.
Right.
So where would he have gone to? Well, they had a Klan, but the minute they started with the German American Bund, they called it.
Yes.
This was a pro-Nazi party. I'm sure Fred was in it, and I'm sure Fred did as much as he could for the Reich. Including say, hey, look, I'll build barracks at these 3 naval bases. Yeah, and you'll be counting troop trains and giving the information to the guy with the wireless, the radio,
and all that stuff really does matter. It's these, whenever we're doing war and all that, the littlest act or the littlest thing that the small guy does can have major effects. Like you said, you radio somebody.
Woody Guthrie, Arlo Guthrie's dad, Fred Trump was so bad about refusing to rent to African Americans, and he was known as a slumlord. Woody Guthrie actually wrote and sang a song about Fred Trump. Trump's name is in the lyrics.
That's this messed up. I mean, obviously you probably know about Operation Paperclip. About the Nazis coming over and taking over academia, medicine and all this and that. Is it almost true to say the Nazis never did lose World War II then?
Some people believe that what happened was they went underground and formed what's known as the Fourth Reich. And, I noted that some of the ambassadors who were present at this opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. For example, the ambassador of Paraguay. Well, the new Paraguayan president, his father was the personal secretary to the longtime dictator there, General Alfredo Stroessner. Now, Stroessner gave political asylum to many of these Nazis, including Joseph Mengele.
Yes.
So here you had
the boys from Brazil movie.
The opening of the, and many of the countries. Ukraine had their ambassador. The Ukrainian government, half of the government is made up of neo-Nazis. So you look at the countries that were represented there, and you see a heavy Nazi influence.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and my question is, Wayne, I know you're, student of history and whatnot. If you look at American society and German society, just pertaining to the racial issue, there wasn't that much of a far gap. Why didn't America just this kind of a good ideal? What stopped America for truly being Nazi? Just like straight up, we're the right race and what's right is might, and
look, they tried to take over. There was an attempted coup against Franklin Roosevelt in 1934. It was run by a bunch of Wall Street guys, including Prescott Bush, the father of H.W. Bush, and many other leading industrialists. They were going to march on Washington with armed troops and take over and basically say President Roosevelt is not physically capable of handling the job as president, and therefore we're going to assume control. So they did try. Charles Lindbergh was one of their big spokespeople. He went over and got the Iron Cross from Hermann Goering, and he led the America First movement, which is a lot like what
make America great again.
But it was America First. But now with Bolton and these guys coming on board, and this Pompeo guy, it's not America. It's Trump said, well, I don't want to get involved in all these wars. Well, yeah, he is. Now he is, because he's got the neocons in there. So I'm afraid we're in for a really rough time.
Well, did you ever hear any information about any intelligent members of any intelligent group actually possessing a sub in the Pacific Ocean that had a nuclear device on it, and they were slated to launch said device to basically incriminate North Korea?
Oh, North Korea, they force now. It's no longer confined to coastal waters,
right?
But North Korea, I don't know what happened to cause this breakdown of their talks with South Korea that was announced just this afternoon. But I got to think part of it is we don't know what this. See, everybody thinks this is Pompeo, the Secretary of State, is such a great guy. He's a Tea Party guy. He came out of the Tea Party movement, and I don't care if they say, well, he graduated first in his class at West Point. So did Robert E. Lee. That didn't work out too well for him either. And Ulysses S. Grant, I think he graduated pretty much near the bottom of his class, but who surrendered to who?
Exactly.
At mathematics. So look, just graduating first in your class at West Point, some people are just good at taking tests,
right.
That's not a measure of somebody's potential.
Exactly.
Anyway, Pompeo, I think he's talking about we're prepared to go in and invest heavily in North Korea, and if they denuclearize. I think Kim Jong-un said, hey, wait a minute, what is he talking about here? He's talking about getting rid of our system, which is not a mixed, it's a socialist economy, right?
Right.
And that's what they prefer. That's what the government prefers, and people who probably work in some of the cities like on the border where they, there are free trade zones, they probably think, oh, it's that much better over in China. But you just can't take North Korea overnight and turn them into, South Korea. And
right.
That's what Pompeo was talking about. This guy has no idea about international affairs. And he can't, because if he shows that he's smarter than the idiot in the White House, he'll be fired immediately.
That's from 48 Rules of Power. I got one more question, and this is kind of scary bit. All right. I said it like this. Let's say North Korea has a nuclear device, right? And they launch it not at America, but into Russia. And I heard, talking to some friends and that Russia is supposed to have an automated system. They detect a nuclear device and they will automatically respond. The Kremlin can't stop that. My question is this. If Kim Jong-il launched a nuclear missile into Russia, it detonated. The automated system detected it. Would that not, in effect, amplify his nuclear capability? Because instead of North Korea launching nukes, Russia will be launching nukes at us.
Well, first of all, I don't think North Korea has these capabilities. I don't think they're even anywhere close to having these capabilities. I'll tell you what is more concerning to me is that several recent Japanese prime ministers have decided to go to a quick turnaround time on a Japanese nuclear warhead. Now, one of the problems with the Fukushima
situation,
the meltdown of the reactor there, was because it was not just it was not just the power plant. It was where Japan was reprocessing and processing uranium and plutonium for their nuclear weapons program. Now they don't have it. They don't have one because their constitution forbids it, but they have what's called a quick turnaround time. And it used to be a matter of weeks to turn that around and create one. I understand now it's down to like 8 hours.
They can make a bomb in 8 hours?
They can turn it around and make a bomb, make a warhead. Not just a bomb, a warhead that can be put on a missile in 8 hours.
Holy shit.
And I'd be much more concerned about Japan launching one of them at North Korea if they feel that they're threatened than the other way around.
I mean, have we not learned?
And the Japanese have learned from that, apparently. Now, I think they keep this very secret, top secret. If the Japanese people knew, well, maybe not the current Japanese people. The younger people say, why not? Why don't we, I mean, they're electing this guy Abe for a reason, and they like his militaristic policies.
No.
The people and the parents that recalled World War II,
they know better.
They're gone. They're very old. That's not who's running Japan now.
That's unselfish. I mean, F it. Let me just segue into one of my questions I ask everyone, Wayne. Oh my God, that's just really depressing there, what you just told me. But do you believe in UFOs or life outside of Earth by chance?
I've seen too many of my colleagues in journalism write stuff about that. So I always say, oh boy, that's the third rail, There's a guy that wrote a book. He was at the New York Times, Howard Bloom, and he lost his job. I don't know if that's the whole reason, but he wasn't at the Times much longer after he wrote a book about that particular subject. I keep an open mind. First of all, when you look, I was a great fan of Stephen Hawking.
Oh yeah.
And I can't believe that the immense size, and it's not just the universe; it's the multiverse.
Right. Multiple dimensions.
We can't be. Look, even if you say we're the only ones in this universe, well, how can you speak for all the infinite number of parallel universes out there? So no. Now, do they have the ability to travel these vast distances? And they've been able to master some sort of space-time distortion.
The cosmos is a
dark
I
read
mode.
About that. Look, I'll tell you, we got the Webb telescope is going to be launched. There's all these other much better telescopes, and I think in time we're going to be able to. I guess right now one telescope actually saw a planet, not through what they call the dip, where it goes in front of the star
and dims the light.
But they actually put the lens on an actual exoplanet. I think they're going to be able to refine this more and more. And here's I don't know anything about it. I've never seen a UFO. I don't even if I saw one, I wouldn't know. Well, what is that? Is that the boys out in Area 51?
Oh, God.
I talked to the station manager, Area 51. I had a conference in Las Vegas. And
what year was that, Wayne? What year was that?
This was in 2008.
Oh, wow.
And he told me, he says, oh, yeah, we love them UFO reports. Because he said, we in the CIA, we weren't supposed to be doing anything domestically. So when we were testing all those U-2s and SR-71s and other aircraft, he said, we love those UFO reports, took the heat off of us.
Wow.
He said, well,
wow.
At least you're not going around telling people it's the CIA illegally testing things in Nevada because they're not supposed to be operating domestically. So he laughed. But I'll tell you where we're going to find out. When the telescopes get so that we actually think have habitable planets, and we detect non-natural light sources.
Right.
This would be like if you look at the dark side of the Earth at night, you're going to see a lot of light coming from the northeast part of the United States.
Correct.
The Chicago area and most of Europe. When we develop that technology, then we'll know for sure, and it'll be based on science.
Well, now, Wayne, do you think the government would actually stop us from learning that? Because, I mean, what good is governing anybody if they all jump on spaceships and fly away?
Well, yeah, the government has a lot of secrets, but how do you, with the internet the way it is, how do you keep something like that?
Net neutrality.
I think
take away net neutrality, and you end up all.
Well, yeah, that's a big issue, and I'm very concerned about it.
What's your concerns?
Effects of that already.
What's your concerns about that? About net neutrality?
Having a fast lane for the people that are willing to pay, having fast lanes for companies that can pay, and then the independent websites, including my own, will be relegated to the down with the marketing and the porn and all the other nonsense, doing it to the internet.
One thing I don't understand, and you mentioned it, touched it earlier. How many people sit there, Donald Trump's a guy I can have a beer with. No, good mother.
Cope with him though, because when he was a habitué of Studio 54 in the 80s, he was well known for that.
Oh, stop!
Yeah, no, it's
our dear leader.
So he's at Studio 50. Studio 54 was the disco, the ultimate disco of the time.
Yes,
and is where all of the glitterati of New York would go, including Trump, and Yeah, they had a bar, but that's not the reason most people went there. I mean, it was the the cocaine that was readily available, and not too far away, you had John Bolton at another place called Plato's Retreat, which was a sex swingers club.
Wow.
Where we now know for his first wife divorced him because she said he forced her to have group sex on these disgusting waterbeds in Plato's Retreat.
I mean, that's just he sit there with all these ministers holding hands on him. God wants him to be here, and oh my God!
I always say this about some of these evangelical ministers, especially in the South, but we have mega churches here in this area of Florida, in the Tampa Bay area. And, they wake up in the morning and they're so concerned about homosexuals.
Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is when they look in the mirror when they're shaving, that's the first homosexual they see during the day. And they've got some issues. They've got some severe psychological issues. And But the ones that cried aloud about pedophiles and homosexuals, it almost happens 9 times out of 10. These are the guys that wind up on the front page of the paper.
Oh God,
involved in some situation.
I don't care what anyone says. You can look at Joel Osteen, and I just see the sweetness, the softness in him. I wouldn't be shocked if a few months down the road, Joe, just like who was that, Eddie Long, getting caught messing around with boys and all that. Because it's just horrible. It's disgusting.
Father Ritter, who started Covenant House in New York, he picked up these homeless runaway teen boys on the street. Everybody gave him an award. He got all these accolades. Father Ritter, what a great guy. And it's a sick world out there. Unfortunately, we have people who claim they're religious and want to do something about it, who are part of the problem.
Well, what about the other religion? The satanic religion, the religion that's using sex magic and children sacrifice. They'll beat some poor victim.
I think we just uncovered one of them up in Albany, New York, this NXIVM group. It was a sex bondage operation. They managed to lure some TV actresses in on it, but I thought what was amazing, and it hasn't been getting any attention by the media, is that Kristen Gillibrand, the senator from New York who took Hillary's seat, her father and stepmother were both involved in that sex cult.
What?
Up in New York, and they're talking about her running for president. She's the first one who came out and said Al Franken needs to resign his Senate seat. Well, maybe she should have a talk. Maybe she should resign her Senate seat, because she lied when she said she only found out about NXIVM after she read about it in the newspaper. I'm sorry, if your dad and your stepmom are both members of that cult and involved with the guy that was running it, I don't think you first found out about it from reading it in the newspaper.
Wait, Senator Clinton's daddy was...
No, Senator Gillibrand from New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I mean, but
yeah, this is one that Hillary was not involved with. I blame her for what she done. People look. She wasn't my favorite person, and and is one of the people being mentioned as a possible 2020 candidate, and I don't know how anybody, I wrote an article about. And, I said, look, somebody's got to get this information to Senator Franken, because he got screwed over by this woman, this Gillibrand.
She's just as wrong as he is.
So what? He was on a USO tour and he was making hand gestures. Bob Hope did worse than that with the women that he went on USO tours with. I haven't seen anybody say we ought to dig up Bob Hope.
Hold on, what did Bob Hope do?
Oh, there were stories about Bob Hope on USO tours with people like Raquel Welch.
Yes.
And Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
He was known as a pretty randy guy,
Oh,
and Brooke Shields later on, who was still underage when he had her out on those USO tours,
So he's a creepy old
Bob Hope
perv.
is a good Republican, so people don't speak ill of him.
The thing about it, when we talk about Republican and Democrat, is there nowadays, really, is there at the higher level any true difference? It seems like they're all paid off by the same people.
Very little. There's a few Democrats. You had Chuck Schumer praise Trump for moving that embassy to Jerusalem. But you had a couple Democrats in the Senate, no Republicans that I saw. Republicans used to criticize Israel, but they became an endangered species. There were some big-time Republicans that used to be very critical of Israel, but they were drummed out.
Can you name drop any? Can you name drop anybody?
Chuck Percy, the senator from Illinois, Bill Scranton, who was the governor of Pennsylvania and talked about as a presidential candidate at one point in time. There was Paul Finley, who was from Illinois. J.W. Fulbright, Arkansas, Democrat. He was a Democrat, but they were both parties. There was James Abner, Republican from South Dakota. He was drummed out. Yeah, many Republicans and Democrats used to question this blind allegiance this country had toward Israel.
Well, one of the that was Duke Cunningham from California back in the day, when I used to work with my brother and everything. And, I thought that guy was so cool. I went to his office, hung out with, some of his staff after hours, just really good, decent people.
Yeah.
And then when I found out about his shenanigans, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And from that same area, San Diego, he's got another guy who's in as much trouble as he was with Duncan Hunter, another Republican, another guy that's been on the.
I remember Duncan.
All kinds of.
I remember. But real quick, Hunter. What is your opinion of the John Birch Society?
Well, these are the guys that used to claim that Dwight Eisenhower was a communist. I was at a conference once out in Newport Beach, California, and it had to be in like 1998 or so, and we were sharing the hotel venue. I only found this out I was in the elevator, and there was some fairly inebriated, fairly nice looking gals in the elevator. I said, "Where's the party? What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, we're having our convention here." I said, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, it's the John Birch Society." I said, "Holy cow, I haven't heard that name in years." I said, "They're still around?"
I guess they are.
And then I was going to say, one or two good-looking gals like you, why are you members of such a kooky outfit, but anyway, these were the people that, they were, I ran into a few later on in Washington, but I'll tell you, I think many of them are found now in the Trump administration.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to segue into, because we all know that they've been bragging about Trump, basically appointing, 68 lower judges to the, lifetime appointments. Yeah. And, the thing with that is that, what type of judicial verdicts are we going to get over the next 20 to,
God only knows. There's a lot of groups that kind of act as ciphers where you can't really tell the difference between the John Birchers. One is the Federalist Society, which actually gets to approve all these judges, these conservative judges. So I would imagine a lot of members of the Federalist Society, if you look at their background, their parents were probably John Birchers, maybe the grandparents.
Now, also, there was a journalist that died. She was, I believe, on the island of Malta. Her car blew up. She was writing about the Paradise Papers. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, a lot. Yeah, this journalist, and I forget her name offhand, but now what she was looking into, she was specifically looking into Malta is a big offshore place for shell corporations. Yes. Some of the ones she was looking into were involved with some of the Trump operations, Kushner, some of his operations, Manafort, especially Manafort in Ukraine, and Wilbur Ross, who was the co-president of the Bank of Cyprus, which was another big money launderer. So you look at these places like Malta, Cyprus, and other of these offshore places, and that's what she was going after, and I think that's why they blew her car up and killed her. And she was saying that the Prime Minister of Malta and his wife were also involved in this. And that guy got reelected, and he's of course one of these guys that is a lot like Trump. He has all these offshore bank accounts and whatnot, and he's done nothing to try to find out who killed her.
Wow. That's so sad. I mean, Dick Gregory used to say the Queen of England is the richest person on the earth. Because
yes, probably she's got a lot of money.
Well, do you think that's true? That
Definitely not her. Yeah, I used to. I knew Dick very well, and we had a good time when we got together. And
can you tell any stories that you had with Dick Gregory?
Well, yeah, I'll tell one. I was at a conference in Washington, and actually it was in Northern Virginia, in Arlington, and there was a break, and Dick. This was a more. I said, well, what are you drinking there? And he says, oh, this is a Cape Cod. I said, well, what's that? He said, well, it's vodka and cranberry juice. And I said, oh. Who's heard many of my jokes before. He said, come on, you're telling one of the best, greatest comedians of all time jokes. He's probably heard them all before. And Dick Gregory said to my friend, he says, oh, come on. I haven't heard so many. He's pretty good. And I looked at my friend and I said, you see there,
Dick Gregory was a class act. He was such a humanitarian.
Here's a great story he told me. The first time he showed up on the Ed Sullivan show. And Ed Sullivan, of course, was this real, Ed Sullivan, he looked anal retentive. A lot of people thought he was very, he looked like Richard Nixon because, like he couldn't turn his neck, and neither could Nixon. They moved their whole body around. And he had beady eyes and a 5 o'clock shadow and the same hair, sort of the same hairline. So Ed Sullivan was really uptight. Dick was on for the first time, and he had already gotten involved in some civil rights issues. So Ed Sullivan, he's really concerned about, he goes, so he's sweating, and Dick says he comes up to him. He's getting ready. This is live TV, by the way, and Sullivan's sweating because Dick's getting ready to go on stage. And Ed Sullivan comes up and says, now, Mr. Gregory, call him Mr. Gregory, you're going to keep everything fine here, nothing political? And he said, oh, no. Dick said, he did this voice like, oh, no, Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to be really good. I'm going to do my act. No, nothing political. And Sullivan's still sweating, right? and he goes, so Sullivan introduces him. He goes out on stage. He does his act, nothing political, and then Sullivan comes up to him after the act, backstage, and he says, "Really great, Dick. It was no longer." He said, "Really great, Dick. Not Mr. Gregory. It's really great, Dick. Really super, and we'll have to have you back again." So see, if Dick Gregory had done something political, I'm sure it wouldn't have been the case. Because Ed Sullivan was a jerk. He was known for keeping grudges against people he didn't know. But Dick Gregory was on again. I remember seeing Dick Gregory as a kid on the Ed Sullivan show. He was on quite a bit.
He was
There was him and another famous comedian named George Kirby.
George Kirby.
African American comedian. George Kirby was great.
Now, did you ever get a chance to meet George Carlin?
George Carlin, no, but I look at George Carlin. Will Rogers, who was able to combine comedy and philosophy so well. It's those two guys, Will Rogers and George Carlin. I never met George Carlin. I always wanted to, but yeah, he was great.
Back to like the satanic thing. Is there any like worldwide, some people may say Illuminati, global banker, the Jews, whatever. Have you ever
No,
detected any type of worldwide organization?
well, all I know is there's a lot of stuff out there. A lot of people make money off of selling these theories
Yeah.
and whatnot. And I once went through some old newspaper archives, the Illustrated London News of like 18. I'm sorry, not 18, 17. I think it was 1789, and
Wow.
it's very hard to read because they use a very odd typeface. But I read this. It was on the front page of the Illustrated London News, and it said something about beware the Illuminati. This is 1789.
Yeah.
And what the story was is that there's this guy named Weizkopf in Bavaria had organized this group called the Illuminati, and it had become a big potent force in Germany and in France with the revolution. And it was basically a warning to the British people that this philosophy is about ready, there's not philosophy, but this movement is about ready to jump the English Channel and come over to England. And it was like a warning. And I'm reading this, and this isn't on the Alex Jones website. This is the Illustrated London News of 1789. So I'm thinking, well, there had to be something to it.
Wow.
I mean, for them in 1789 to be concerned. And
because I know the government, I believe, received the book, and they
started. And this is what the newspaper in London at the time was warning the British that this movement, it was spreading.
Wow. So I mean,
yeah.
If you put the Illuminati with Satanists together, total destruction, total death. We have Plum Island making biological weapons, or back in the day at least. And then you have, all these other clandestine entities doing their various, projects. But it all seems to, even our technology with the computers, all seems to be culminating to give a certain entity power over the rest of us.
Here's what I can say about that. I once visited the Masonic Temple in Alexandria, Virginia. That's the one that is dedicated to George Washington.
Wow.
And I know a little bit about the Masons. I mean, they kind of, it used to be where you'd never asked to join them. They would actually come to you.
Yes.
And
that was the only way.
I had those approaches before. And but after touring this place, which is very odd, anyone who's ever in Northern Virginia in the D.C. area ought to take the tour through the Masonic Temple in Alexandria. Anyway, afterwards, the guy says, anyway, are you interested in joining? I go, what? When did this start? He was saying, oh, yeah, you can work through this chair. You'll become a 19th degree Mason in very short order.
Wow.
It used to be quite a process, but you know what's killing them? The internet's killing them. Nobody's joining these stupid organizations anymore. These fraternal, these secret organizations with secrets or secret organizations.
Secrets out.
Because the internet, you don't need that. You don't need that with the internet. You need it to be in these organizations to get a good job,
right?
And this kind of thing. And it's no longer the case. And so many of these organizations, like the Masons, are not going to be around much longer. Organized religion, it's the same thing. They're having the same issues.
Right.
You know how many churches are being sold off because people don't go anymore?
Well, don't want to get butt raped.
The problem with the mega church, the Joel Osteen and people like that, is that's not a replacement. They're preaching something that's not even the Bible. They're preaching prosperity, the prosperity gospel, which is all about making money. And they skip over the part where Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple.
Right.
The only time when he got violent that we see reported in the Bible, in the New Testament, is when he physically threw these people and whipped them with a whip. He was whipping these guys, and of course if he were to come back, I said, the first guy he'd whip would be Joel Osteen, and the second one would be Benny Hinn.
Well, hopefully he'd get around to Goldman Sachs and them, the money changers.
Yeah, well, he would, but he'd have to get the so-called Christians first. Because, they've been giving them a bad name for so long.
Oh yeah,
But anyway, all this the satanic stuff, the NXIVM, the religious sex cult. What's outing? The internet is outing these people. They can't hide behind their cloaks anymore, and
no,
so they can do what they want, but they're being outed. They're being identified. There's a lot of small-time journalists, local journalists. I don't mean that as pejorative,
right?
But they're keeping an eye on groups like this within their own neighborhoods, within their own cities and towns. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of places for these satanic
scoundrels to hide.
We got the Church of Scientology headquarters is right here in Clearwater, Florida, about a half-hour drive from where I'm at, and they're being outed. The son of the founder of that cult, L. Ron Hubbard's son, is one of their biggest detractors now. And how do we know that this Scientology is a fraud? Is because L. Ron Hubbard's son has a website where he denounces them and their practices.
Well,
It's
funny that you mentioned Scientology, because I heard that Scientology actually helped the Nation of Islam in the past, like helped them get started.
They have an agreement now. Farrakhan and David Miscavige, the head of Scientology, they work together. But you know why they're working together? Because these fraudulent activities are being outed by websites on the internet. Many of the people who start the website and run them are ex-members of these groups.
Wow.
And so therefore, it was ex-members of NXIVM that outed Gillibrand and her father and stepmother and all the other kooks involved in that cult outside Albany. Of course, they're funded by the heiresses to the Bronfman fortune, the Seagrams. That's why they have so much money. So, I just say I'm not so worried about these groups anymore. If the Illuminati were a real issue, I think people who were leaving the Illuminati would start a website and denounce them, but I haven't seen that. So I would imagine maybe they ceased to be a real problem many years ago.
Well, do you mean, who's that? Joe Scales, and people always talking about the economy's going to collapse. This is a fiat currency, Federal Reserve, fractional reserve.
Gold bug. Yeah, these are the gold bugs. You look at who sponsors their programs, you see it all. Yeah, they're gold bugs, and I don't put any faith in what they say. They want people to take their money out of the stock market and put it into some other.
Into gold. As we know, during World War II, they took gold from the people. They came to your house, grabbed the gold, and that was that. Now, do you have any information about vaccinations? I want to get the truth out to people. Are vaccinations safe? Are they unsafe? Or do you have any information?
I remember when I was a kid. Now, I may vaguely remember when I got the vaccination for polio, which was the Salk vaccination, Jonas Salk vaccination. And there were some problems with that. And I know street, the town I grew up with, we were all standing in line at the elementary school waiting to go into the cafeteria to take a sugar cube with a little red splotch on it. It was the Sabin polio vaccine, and everybody took it.
Really?
My parents, myself, my brothers and sisters, in the line. I'm amazed that there's not photos of that, because people would say, "Oh, look, it's like leading the sheep to slaughter." But you know what? The Sabin was a much safer vaccine, and anyone who's seen anyone who has suffered from polio and survived, it's horrible. It's a horrible.
Yeah, I know a guy here in town. His guy's name's Rocky. Yeah. Has legs the size of toothpicks. He still gets around.
Horrible.
It's
So
not fair.
so I think there's some vaccination programs. I've been to Africa, and I obviously had vaccinations for yellow fever and cholera, and I'm glad I got those.
Yes.
Because some of the diseases over there. I mean, I wish they would develop a vaccine for Ebola, for example, but they haven't. They can't, and they've been working on one. But that's like, I know there's people that say, oh, you shouldn't take vaccines or vaccinate your kids. You want your child to, if he was in Liberia a few years ago, and somebody said, I want to vaccinate your child against Ebola. And, you listen to somebody like Alex Jones or something. Oh, you can't do that.
Yeah.
All right, you want to watch your child die of Ebola virus? It's where your organs inside your body turn to a jellified mass. I'm sorry. I'll go with the vaccination.
Every time. No. And blah blah blah, autism, all this crap. And I want people to get the truth. We have vaccines for a reason, and there's always going to be a subset of the population that cannot handle it.
Alex Jones probably has never met too many people from Liberia or Sierra Leone.
Well, who was that? Al Sharpton said that Alex Jones was deeply racist. Now, I know he had that one black guy, Jakari Jones, on the outfit. See, the way
I was down and doing. I was doing Alex Jones's interviews in Austin at least 2 or 3 times. He flew me there, and I met Jakari. Yeah, no, and there's another African American woman that's doing him.
Yeah,
no, look. The guy. I really felt like after I left there. I mean, he might have been okay when he was just doing libertarian stuff, which I could take some of that. Some of it's out there where the buses don't run. But when he became nothing more than an echo chamber for Donald Trump, and he had this dirty politics guy, Roger Stone.
Oh God, yes.
I said, no, that's it. That's enough is enough.
Well, I was kind of a late bloomer to the whole Alex Jones. The way I found Alex Jones, I first found this guy named Mark Dice. He did a story about Alex Jones crying over J.T. Reddy. And I'm like, well, who the hell is J.T. Reddy? Found out J.T. Reddy was a white nationalist, basically, hater, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw the video where Alex Jones is straight up crying over this dude. Oh, J.T. Reddy was I'm like, are you serious?
Yeah. Look, he grew up in Dallas. His parents were John Birchers. Of course, he was born in 1973, I believe. Jones was, but his parents lived in Dallas back in 1963, 10 years prior to Jones being born. And of course, the John Birchers were part of that Welcome to Dallas committee.
Welcome to Dallas.
Really, even though they tried to pin it on a pro-Marxist, pro-Cuban guy named Oswald, we know who was responsible for killing Kennedy. It was the John Birch elements and the CIA boys that all gathered in Dallas for the big turkey shoot.
Speaking of CIA, I'm glad you mentioned them. Me and Dimebag have been trying to call CIA. We've been calling them every week, getting a run around. If you have any contact, could you please tell them just to send the public relation officer on the other morning show? We're good guys. We're not going to embarrass them, with the whole crack and all that crap.
You're not going to get anyone from officially from the CIA, but you could get probably a few CIA people who are very critical of the agency.
Well, you got my number. Please pass it on. You have my number.
John Kiriakou, who was put in jail because he blew the whistle on the torture stuff. Now they're getting ready to make the woman who allowed that to go on is to make her the director. But
Hassel.
Kiriakou, you can reach Kiriakou if you call Sputnik Radio in Washington. He's working out of there, so you can certainly get him on the
Sputnik Radio.
Get in touch with Sputnik Radio.
I will contact him. Thank you, Wayne. I would definitely contact. And once again, I from the bottom of my heart, I just want to tell you thank you. Seriously, thank you. for coming on this show and telling the information you've been telling me, because you have really been opening up my mind to a lot of different scenarios that I was not quite aware of. You really hard, and the work that you're doing is awesome for humanity. You're a true.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I just wish these cable news networks would cover more of these issues.
But they can't. They can't. Even Fox News is the base. It's owned by a Saudi and somebody else. They won't.
Super Murdoch. Fox. I used to appear quite regularly on Fox, and they were bad back in the day. I mean, I've been on Sean Hannity's program and Bill O'Reilly's program, and John Gibson when he had a program, and what's her name, Greta Van Susteren,
yes,
the Scientologist. I did a lot of even Geraldo, and I got to say that even though they were very right wing back in the 2000, before and after 9/11. They're just totally unwatchable today.
Yes,
I can't deal with these three nitwits at Fox and Friends. Apparently, Trump gets all of his intelligence in the morning from watching Fox and Friends.
Well, one of those Fox News chicks is messing around with Trump's daughter or son. I forget, she was on the 5 on 5.
Yeah. Well,
come on.
Yeah, I know. It's disgusting. Well, thank God Captain Kangaroo isn't still on the air. Can you imagine if he got all of his intelligence from watching that?
I used to watch him eating honeycombs.
Yeah. He'd probably be better off if he got all of his information from Captain Kangaroo.
Well, what scared me was about, when Trump on the Alex Jones show, he goes, and Alex, you will have a voice in the White House, and I'm like, are you serious?
And Alex went to Alex was there for the inauguration. Funny thing happened though, he didn't get any special seating.
There's right in the crowd with everyone else.
Yeah.
You cannot take away from the man.
But it's always, P.T. Barnum used to say there's a sucker born every minute and there's another one born to take them. And basically that's what happened between Trump and Jones at the inauguration.
I'm running out of time on this report, but seriously, I would like to ask you to come back to the morning show, the big show. This is a little spinoff, but really, I really would like for you to come back maybe June 1st or June the second week, the second Friday of June, if it's possible. I'll totally call you, offline or whatnot.
Okay.
But I totally want you to come on.
I may be. I'll probably be away if this trip I've got planned from the Middle East happens. I'll be away, but I'll be back in the States the second week of June.
Awesome. So maybe we can get you on the third Friday and you can tell us all about your journey.
Okay.
Well,
Sounds good.
That's Wayne, I cannot tell you, you, like I said, you're a true journalist. You did not have to come on the show tonight, but you chose to. And I am so personally thankful,
You can join it.
It's awesome. To me, but I love the way that you talk, the way that you break it down.
Knowledge is out there for everybody to get a hold of. It's just that sometimes I think I'm a font of useless trivia, but I've got neighbors here who can't remember what they had for breakfast in the morning, so I guess I'm still doing fairly well.
Heck yeah, you are. And the reason why they probably forget is because of Big Pharma and all those prescription drugs they're taking.
Right. Yeah. 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 Most of Florida looks like a scene out of World War Z.
Zombies. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you. Okay. And come back on the show, and we're gonna have more questions for you, and hope you have a great. Awesome, guys. Thank you. Normally special reports on the hour, but like I said, this was my first time ever talking to Wayne. Very, very very, very intelligent man. And for the fag that sit there and says, stop cooning, bro, fuck you, bitch. And secondly, you know, this ain't about fucking me. This is about the information. This is about making the world a better place for all of us. You can sit here in your little fucking tribe doing this and that, but you ain't shit. There's only one race, and that's the human race. And if you disagree with me, you're a stupid fuck, period. And I don't have time to argue and debate the fucking reality of the situation with you. We are here at the Other Morning Show and special report to try to make the world better. So thank you all. Hope you have a great night. I'm going to get another beer. I'm going to relax. This has been Special Report. I'm TruePowerIsMine. Peace.